The morning Alexandra Pierce missed the wagon train began with hope. The prairie sky stretched wide and blue above her, endless as the future she believed awaited her in California. She stood near the creek where she had gone to wash her hands, her white traveling bonnet tied neatly beneath her chin. The wagons had been resting at dawn, wheels creaking softly, oxen lowing as families prepared for another long day west. She had only stepped away for a moment, just a moment. When she returned, the horizon was empty. No wagons, no oxen, no voices, no dust cloud marking their path, only silence, her breath caught in her throat. "No," she whispered, dropping the small tin cup she carried. It struck a stone and rolled uselessly into the grass. She ran toward the trail they had followed for weeks, her boots slipping in the dry dirt. Surely they had only gone ahead a short distance. Surely someone would notice she was missing. Surely her fiancé Thomas would realize she was gone. But the prairie swallowed sound and hope alike. By midday, the sun burned high and merciless. Alexandra's pale skin flushed red beneath the heat. She walked in the direction she believed the wagons had taken, her skirts snagging on sagebrush. The land stretched in every direction, rolling hills and tall grass that shimmered like a golden sea. No sign of life. By late afternoon, fear settled deep into her bones. She had little food, little water, no horse, no weapon. She was a bride meant for lace curtains and a proper home knot, the wild frontier, alone. When she stumbled over a rock and fell hard to her knees, she did not rise immediately. Instead, she wept. The sound was small in that vast land. She did not hear the horse approach. Best not. Stay sitting there. The voice was low, rough, unused. Alexandra gasped and scrambled to her feet. A man sat atop a dark bay horse a few yards away. He was broad-shouldered, his beard thick and streaked with gray, though his face beneath was not yet old. His coat was worn buckskin, his rifle resting easily across the saddle. His eyes sharp and guarded studied her, without warmth. I was with a wagon train," she stammered. They must have left without me." The man said nothing at first. He looked toward the empty horizon. "Happens," he finally said. "Trains don't turn back." Her heart dropped further. "They'll come for me." He held her gaze, and something in his silence told her the truth before he spoke it. "No, ma'am," he said gently, but firmly. "They won't." Her hands trembled. "Then I'll die out here." He studied her again, her fine traveling dress, now stained with dirt, her trembling chin, her stubborn lift of pride, despite terror. "Name's Harold Boone," he said at last. "I've got a cabin north of here. You can come along if you like." Suspicion flickered in her eyes. She had been warned of mountain men and trappers, wild, solitary men who preferred animals to people. "You live alone?" she asked. "Yes." A pause. "I won't harm you," he added gruffly. "But I won't beg you, neither." The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The prairie would grow deadly cold once darkness fell. Alexandra swallowed her pride. "My name is Alexandra Pierce," she said carefully, "and I would be grateful for your help." Harold nodded once and extended his hand to help her mount behind him. She hesitated, only a second, before placing her gloved hand in his rough one. As the horse carried them northward, Alexandra looked back once at the empty horizon. Her old life was already gone, and somewhere deep inside, a quiet, frightened voice wondered if perhaps she had not been abandoned, but rescued. The ride north felt longer than it was. Alexandra sat stiffly behind Harold on the narrow saddle, careful not to press too closely against him. The scent of leather, pine, and smoke clung to his coat. His back was solid and steady, unmoving even when the horse shifted over uneven ground. They rode in silence. The prairie slowly gave way to higher ground, scattered with pine trees and rocky ridges. The wind grew cooler as the sun lowered, and Alexandra shivered despite herself. Without turning, Harold shrugged off his outer coat and handed it back to her. "You'll need it," he said simply. She hesitated before accepting it. "Thank you." By the time the sky turned indigo, they reached his cabin. It stood tucked between tall pines near a narrow stream, smoke curling faintly from a stone chimney. The structure was small but sturdy hand-hewn logs, a slanted roof patched carefully against weather. A stack of chopped firewood lined one wall, and animal pelts hung drying nearby. It was not the home she had imagined beginning married life in, but it was shelter. Harold dismounted first and helped her down with surprising gentleness. "Mind your step," he murmured. Inside, the cabin was warm. A fire crackled in the hearth. A simple wooden table stood near the center, 2 chairs, a narrow bed against the far wall, and shelves lined with dried herbs, tin cups, and carefully folded blankets. It was neat, very neat. "You may take the bed," Harold said, setting aside his rifle. "I'll sleep by the fire." Alexandra blinked in surprise. "I cannot take your bed." "You can," he replied firmly, "and you will." There was no argument in his tone, only quiet certainty. He moved about the room with efficient motions, ladling stew from an iron pot hanging over the fire. The smell of venison and root vegetables filled the air, and Alexandra realized how hungry she truly was. She sat carefully at the table while he placed a bowl before her. "Thank you," she said again. He gave a small nod and sat opposite her. For several minutes, the only sound was the scrape of spoons and the crackle of fire. Finally, she spoke. "How long have you lived out here, Mr. Boone?" "Harold," he corrected gently. 10 years. "Alone?"
Yes.
She studied him by firelight. The lines around his eyes suggested both hardship and something deeper, loss. "Perhaps your family?" she asked softly. His spoon paused mid-air. "Gone," he said. The single word closed the subject. Alexandra lowered her eyes. "I am sorry." He resumed eating without responding. Later, as the fire burned low, Alexandra stood uncertainly near the bed. The weight of the day settled heavily upon her shoulders. "My fiancé," she began hesitantly. "Thomas. He was waiting in California. We were to be married once I arrived." Harold's jaw tightened slightly. "He'll think you dead." The bluntness stung, though she knew he meant no cruelty. "Perhaps," she whispered. Silence stretched between them. "You aim to keep heading west?" he asked after a moment. She looked around the cabin, the fire, the sturdy walls, the quiet safety. "I don't know," she admitted. Outside, wind moved through the trees, a lonely but steady sound. Harold spread his blanket near the hearth. "You're safe here," he said gruffly. "No one comes this far north." It was not a romantic promise. It was better. It was truth. Alexandra lay down on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling beams. She had spent months imagining lace curtains, wedding flowers, and a husband waiting eagerly at journey's end. Instead, she lay in a trapper's cabin beside a man who barely spoke. And yet, for the first time since she had seen the empty horizon, she was not afraid. As sleep claimed her, she did not hear Harold rise once in the night, to step outside and scan the darkness, guarding against wolves, weather, and anything else that might threaten the unexpected woman now sleeping beneath his roof. He had lived alone for 10 years, and already the silence felt different. Alexandra had never chopped wood before. On the 3rd morning at the cabin, she stood in the crisp mountain air, gripping an axe far too heavy for her hands. Frost silvered the grass, and her breath puffed in small white clouds. Harold watched from a few feet away, arms crossed. "You don't have to do that," he said. "Yes, I do," she insisted, lifting the axe again. "I will not sit idle while you provide for me." The blade struck the log at an awkward angle and bounced off harmlessly. Harold exhaled slowly. Without a word, he stepped behind her, gently adjusting her grip. His large hands covered hers on the handle. His presence was warm and steady at her back. "Wider stance," he murmured. "Let the weight do the work." The next swing split, the wood clean down the middle. Alexandra gasped in surprise. Harold stepped away quickly, as if realizing how close he had been. "There," he said gruffly. "That's enough for today." But it wasn't just wood. She was learning. Days passed. Then weeks. Winter crept in quietly, dusting the trees in white and freezing the stream at its edges. Travel west was no longer possible, even if she had wished it. The mountain passes would be blocked with snow soon. So she stayed. At first, they moved around one another, like strangers, forced into shared space. Alexandra washed dishes in the stream and mended worn shirts with careful stitches. Harold trapped and hunted, returning at dusk with fur pelts slung over his shoulder. But slowly, something shifted, she began, humming softly while sweeping the floor. He began lingering at the table after supper, instead of retreating immediately into silence. One evening, as snow fell heavily outside, Alexandra unfolded a small bundle from her satchel. "What's that?" Harold asked. "My wedding gloves," she said quietly. They were white, once, now slightly yellowed from travel. "I thought I would wear them when I reached California," she continued. "I imagined a little church, a proper ceremony." Harold poked at the fire. "You still might." She looked at him across the flickering light. "Do you believe that?" He did not answer. The truth hung between them. No one would come searching this far north. By spring, the wagon train would be hundreds of miles away. Thomasiphi, he had grieved her at all, would move on. The wind howled outside, rattling the cabin walls. "You loved him?" Harold asked finally. Alexandra considered the question. "I loved the idea of him," she admitted softly. "He was kind, ambitious. He spoke of a fine house and a mercantile business. It all sounded secure." Harold's jaw tightened slightly. "But," he prompted. "But I do not know if he ever truly saw me," she whispered. Silence settled again. Harold stood abruptly and stepped outside into the storm. Alexandra's heart twisted. Had she said too much? Minutes passed. Snow blew in through the open doorway until she rose to close it. When Harold returned, his hair and shoulders dusted white, he held something in his gloved hands. A small pine branch, heavy with snow. "For the table," he muttered, "so it don't feel so bleak." He placed it in a tin cup near the center of the room. It was such a simple gesture, such a quiet offering. And suddenly, Alexandra understood. This man who claimed to prefer solitude had noticed her loneliness, had tried, in his own silent way, to soften it. Winter deepened. One night, a blizzard roared so fiercely that the cabin shook. The fire burned low, despite Harold's efforts. Cold crept into every corner. Alexandra woke, shivering violently. Without a word, Harold rose from his place near the hearth and laid another blanket over her. But the cold would not ease. After a long moment of hesitation, he spoke into the darkness. "Move closer to the fire." She sat up, teeth chattering. "You'll freeze. I've known worse." Still, she hesitated. Finally, he added, almost reluctantly, "There's room." The words were simple, but they changed everything. She moved to the hearth, and when another gust of wind shook the cabin, she found herself instinctively reaching for the nearest warmth. His arm, he stiffened at first. Then, slowly, carefully, he allowed it. The storm raged outside. Inside, something else began to thaw. Spring came slowly to the mountains. The snow did not vanish all at once. It softened first edges, melting into silver trickles that ran down rock and root. The frozen stream began to murmur again, low and patient, as though clearing its throat after months of silence. Inside the cabin, something else was changing too. Alexandra no longer felt like a guest. She rose early now, sometimes before Harold, and rekindled the fire. She had learned how much kindling it needed, how to stack the wood so it caught quickly. She moved about the cabin, with familiarity hanging herbs to dry, folding blankets, even laughing softly when she burned biscuits, and Harold tried, politely, to eat them anyway. "You needn't pretend they're good," she teased one morning. "They're food," he replied, chewing stubbornly. She shook her head, smiling. It startled him. Still, how bright her smile was in that rough-hewn room. One afternoon, as the last of the snow melted, Harold saddled his horse. "The pass will clear soon," he said quietly. "You could head west." The words landed heavier than he intended. Alexandra stood by the doorway, watching him tighten the straps. "Is that what you want?" she asked. He did not look at her. "What I want don't matter much." "That isn't true." He finally met her eyes. There, it was the guarded look she had first seen on the prairie. The look of a man who had buried too much to risk, burying more. "You came west to marry," he said. "You deserve the life you planned." Alexandra stepped closer. "And what if I no longer want that life?" The breeze stirred her hair gently around her shoulders. She no longer wore the fine traveling dress. It had been patched and replaced by simpler skirts suited for work. Her hands, once soft, now bore faint calluses. She looked stronger, certain. "You think this life is easy?" Harold asked roughly. "Winter near killed you, but it did not," she replied softly. "Because you did not let it." He turned away. "Harold," she said, her voice steady now. "You saved my life." "That weren't the plan," he muttered. "What was to leave you at the next settlement, come spring." Her heart skipped. "But you didn't." Silence stretched between them. Finally, he spoke the truth. He had been holding all winter. "I buried my wife 10 years ago," he said quietly. "Fever took her, took our little boy too. After that, I figured loving was a fool's gamble." The words trembled, despite his effort to steady them. Alexandra felt tears sting her eyes, not from pity, but from understanding. "You think loving again dishonors them?" she asked gently. "I think loving again means risking that pain." She stepped close enough now that she could feel the warmth of him. "Harold Boone," she said softly, "life is risk. Crossing the prairie was risk. Breathing is risk. But winter taught me something." He looked down at her. "It taught me that surviving is not the same as living." The breeze rustled the pines above them. "I was meant to marry a man who wanted a wife to fit into his plans," she continued. "But I found a man who makes room at his fire without being asked." His jaw tightened. "You don't know what you're choosing." "I do." She reached for his hand. This time, he did not hesitate. "I am not the bride who missed her wagon anymore," she said quietly. "I am the woman who stayed." Emotion flickered openly across his face. Now fear, longing, hope, warring together. "You sure about that?" he asked. She smiled, eyes bright. For the first time in 10 years, Harold allowed himself to pull someone close without bracing for loss. He wrapped his arms around her carefully, as though she were something precious and breakable. But she was neither. She was strong, and she chose him. Behind them, the mountains stood tall and silent witnesses. The thaw had come, and with it, something neither of them had expected. The pass cleared by late spring. Word traveled slowly in the mountains, but it traveled nonetheless. A pair of traders passed near the cabin one afternoon, their mules heavy with goods and news from settlements farther west. Alexandra stood beside Harold as the men shared stories. "Wagon train passed through Carson months ago," one trader said. "Lost a few along the way. Hard winter." Harold's hand tightened slightly around the tin cup he held. Alexandra remained calm. "No one came back searching?" she asked evenly. The trader shook his head. "Once a train moves on, it moves on." She nodded. There it was, final and certain. Her old life had continued without her, and she did not feel the ache she once expected. After the traders left, silence settled around the cabin again. The air was warm now, the meadow blooming with wildflowers. The stream ran clear and lively. "You heard them," Harold said quietly. "No one would fault you if you still wanted to go." She looked at him, truly looked at him, the strength in his shoulders, the weathered kindness in his eyes, the quiet way he waited without demanding. "Harold," she said gently, "if I leave now, it will not be because I was abandoned." He swallowed. "It will be because I chose to." The words hung between them. "And I do choose," she continued, stepping closer. "I choose this cabin, I choose the mountains, and I choose you." Emotion flickered across his face. Again that same guarded man, fighting hope. "You might regret it," he murmured. "I might," she admitted. "But I would regret more, never knowing what this could become." He let out a slow breath. Then, in a voice rough with feeling, he said, "I don't have much to offer. No fine house, no town, no proper church." She smiled softly. "You have steady hands, a good heart, and room at your fire." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, Harold did something unexpected. He stepped inside the cabin and returned with a small wooden box. It was simple, hand-carved, worn smooth with age. opened it. Inside lay a delicate silver band. "It was my wife's," he said quietly. "I kept it, not knowing why." Alexandra's breath caught not in jealousy, not in fear, but in reverence for what it meant. He was not replacing his past. He was trusting her with it. "You don't have to," she began. "I want to," he said firmly. "If you'll have it." She held out her hand, not as the abandoned bride who had once dreamed of lace gloves and polished floors, but as a woman who had survived winter, learned to split wood, and found love where she least expected it. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit. The wind stirred the trees gently, sunlight filtering through pine branches above them. No preacher stood nearby. No gathered guests. No wedding march. Only mountains. Only sky. Only truth. Harold rested his forehead lightly against hers. "Reckon I never planned to love again," he said softly. "And I never planned to miss my wagon," she replied. A quiet laugh escaped him. "Funny how life works." She smiled. "Yes," she whispered. "It is." That evening, they sat together on the cabin steps, watching the sun sink behind the peaks. The prairie she once feared stretched far below in golden waves. She no longer saw abandonment there. She saw the path that led her here, to him, to this life. The bride who missed the wagon had become something far greater than she ever intended. A woman who chose her own future. And Harold Boone, the reclusive trapper who believed his heart buried beneath snow and sorrow, found that love like spring returns even to the coldest ground. Their story did not end with survival. It began with choice, and in the quiet of the mountains, beneath a sky that seemed endless, they built a life not planned, but deeply, fiercely, and beautifully chosen. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Western stories.